Echoes of the abyss. Aaron Davis had always been a thrill seeker, drawn to the dark and unexplained. As a budding journalist in search of his big break, stories about haunted places and mysterious disappearances were his specialty. When he stumbled upon the legend of a small, isolated village deep in the Whispering Pines forest, he knew he had to investigate. The village was known for one terrifying event that happened every 13 years. On the night of the blood moon, the abyss would awaken, and someone would vanish, never to return. Determined to uncover the truth, Aaron convinced his partner, Evelyn, to join him on the investigation. Evelyn, though skeptical, had her own fascination with the paranormal. Together, they made the long drive into the remote village, excited and nervous about what they might discover. Chapter 1, The Village and Its Secrets. As they arrived at the village just before dusk, it felt as though they had stepped back in time. The houses were old and weathered, the streets eerily empty. A cold wind swept through the trees, carrying with it a faint, almost imperceptible whisper. Aaron parked the car near the village square, where a single dim street light flickered overhead. The villagers were reluctant to talk. Most of them avoided Aaron and Evelyn altogether, locking the doors and drawing their curtains. But an elderly man named Rowan eventually agreed to speak with them. He had lived in the village his entire life and had witnessed the last 2 blood moons. His face was deeply lined with age and worry, and he spoke in hushed tones, glancing over his shoulder as though afraid the abyss could hear him. "You should leave," Rowan said, his voice barely a whisper. "The abyss, it's not a place, it's a force. Every 13 years, it calls to someone. It doesn't matter who, and it doesn't matter where you are. If it calls your name, you're already lost." Aaron, intrigued, pressed for more details, but Rowan hesitated. After a long pause, he finally relented. "They say it starts with an echo," Rowan continued, his eyes distant. "You'll hear your own voice, calling you into the forest. It sounds innocent at first, like a trick of the wind. But the more you listen, the more you'll be drawn to it. The abyss knows you, it'll lure you in, and once it has you, you don't come back." Despite Rowan's warnings, Aaron and Evelyn remained determined to uncover the truth. They set up their equipment and prepared for the night ahead, eager to explore the forest where the abyss supposedly resided. Chapter 2, The Echoes. Begin that night, under the dim light of the blood moon, Aaron and Evelyn entered the Whispering Pines forest. The air was heavy with mist, and the trees stood like silent sentinels, watching them with an oppressive stillness. Armed with flashlights and their cameras, they ventured deeper, recording everything. At first, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. The forest was dark, but it was just like any other place they had explored before. As they walked, Aaron noticed something odd. The forest felt wrong, like the air itself was distorted. The path they had taken began to twist and turn in ways that didn't make sense. The trees, once standing in neat rows, now appeared chaotic, as though they were shifting around them. Then, it happened. Evelyn, walking a few steps ahead, suddenly stopped in her tracks, her flashlight trembling in her hand. Aaron rushed to her side, asking what was wrong, but she didn't respond. Instead, she stared into the darkness, her face pale. "Aaron," she whispered, her voice shaky. "I just heard you, behind me." Aaron frowned. He had been right beside her the whole time. There was no way she could have heard him from behind. But then, he heard it too. A soft, distant voice, calling his name. It was faint, but unmistakable. It was his own voice. Chapter 3, The Abyss reveals itself. Panic set in. The echoes grew louder, more persistent, as if the forest itself was alive and mocking them. They tried to retrace their steps, but every path seemed to lead them deeper into the forest. Their flashlights flickered, casting long shadows that danced in the mist. They stumbled upon an ancient stone altar, covered in strange, indecipherable symbols. Around the altar were scattered belongings, old, tattered clothes, shoes, and personal items. Aaron recognized some of the items from the descriptions of people who had gone missing over the years. This was where they had been taken by the abyss. Suddenly, the ground trembled, and a deep, resonant hum filled the air. The mist parted, revealing a massive, dark chasm in the earth, the abyss. It was a gaping void, seemingly endless, pulling at the very souls. From its depths, a shadowy figure began to rise. It was tall and formless, with glowing eyes that seemed to pierce through the darkness. Aaron and Evelyn backed away in terror, but the figure followed, its eyes fixed on them. The echoes grew deafening, overlapping voices calling the names from all directions. Evelyn screamed as she felt an invisible force tugging at her, pulling her toward the abyss. Chapter 4, the final descent. In a frantic attempt to escape, they ran through the forest, but no matter where they went, the abyss seemed to appear before them. The shadowy figure was always just behind, never running, but always closing in. Evelyn stumbled and fell, her flashlight rolling away into the darkness. Aaron turned to help her, but when he looked up, he saw something that made his blood run cold, himself, standing just a few feet away. It wasn't a reflection, nor a trick of the light. It was another version of him, standing silently, staring back with lifeless eyes. Before he could react, the doppelganger whispered his name, its voice blending with the other echoes. Aaron froze, his mind unable to comprehend what he was seeing. In that moment of hesitation, the shadow figure reached for him, its cold, dark hands pulling him toward the abyss. Evelyn screamed his name, but it was too late. The abyss consumed them both, their voices joining the eternal chorus of echoes. Epilogue, the new echo. The next morning, the villagers found Aaron wandering the forest's edge. He was alone, his eyes hollow, his voice distant. When they asked him what had happened, he simply said, "The abyss is hungry. It's coming for more." As he walked away, the villagers noticed something strange. His shadow didn't follow him. It stood at the forest's edge, watching, waiting. The abyss had claimed another, and the echoes would soon call again. The end.